Ethan's hands shook as he read Ryan's letter, each word a dagger. "You're a mistake I can't fix." At 22, in a Georgia town where secrets festered behind closed doors, Ethan's heart broke. 6 months of stolen moments with Ryan, whispered promises in parked cars, fleeting touches under the cover of night, ended in betrayal. The letter, left on his doorstep like a coward's confession, exposed him to a community quick to judge. He crumpled the paper, torn between hiding his truth or fighting for who he was. Willow Creek wasn't a place for people like Ethan. The town thrived on unspoken rules. Go to church, keep your head down, fit in. Being gay wasn't just frowned upon. It was a sin whispered about in hushed tones at the diner or the gas station. Ethan had known this since he was a kid, catching the sharp glances when he didn't join the other boys chasing girls or throwing footballs. He'd learned to blend in, to laugh at the right jokes, to bury the part of himself that didn't fit. But Ryan had changed that. They'd met at a county fair last summer, Ryan's easy grin cutting through Ethan's defenses. Older by a few years, Ryan was the kind of guy everyone liked. Charming, confident, the son of a local hardware store owner. Their connection started with late-night talks by the river, away from prying eyes. Ethan had dared to hope, to believe Ryan's promises of us against the world. But the letter in his hands told a different story. Ryan was scared. Scared of the town, of his father, of what it meant to be seen with Ethan. So he'd run, leaving Ethan to face the fallout alone. The weight of it hit Ethan as he paced his small bedroom. His chest tightened, anger mixing with a raw ache he couldn't name. He'd trusted Ryan, let himself feel something real, only to be discarded like a secret too heavy to carry. Worse, Ryan's words hinted at more than a breakup. "You're a mistake I can't fix." The phrase burned, suggesting Ryan might not keep their secret. In a town like Willow Creek, a rumor like that could ruin Ethan, his job at the auto shop, his ties to his family, his place in a world that already felt too small. He grabbed his jacket and headed out, the night air cool against his flushed skin. He needed to move, to think, to escape the suffocating panic clawing at him. His feet carried him toward the town's edge, where the Willow Creek Community Center stood, a modest building that felt like a lifeline. Pastor Daniel ran it, a man who'd always seemed different from the rest of the town, quiet, thoughtful, someone who listened without preaching. Ethan had never been religious, not like his father, a deacon who quoted scripture like a weapon. But Daniel was different. He'd been there when Ethan's mother died of cancer 3 years ago, offering words that didn't feel hollow. Ethan hesitated at the center's door, the letter still crumpled in his pocket. Part of him wanted to turn back, to hide like he always had. But hiding hadn't saved him from Ryan's betrayal. He pushed the door open, the faint hum of fluorescent lights greeting him. Daniel was there, sorting papers at a desk, his presence steady in a way that made Ethan's racing thoughts slow. "Ethan?" Daniel's voice was calm, but his eyes caught the tension in Ethan's stance. "You okay?" For a moment, Ethan considered lying, brushing it off like he always did. But the letter burned in his pocket, and the truth spilled out before he could stop it. "Ryan's gone," he said, voice cracking. "He left a letter. Said I'm a mistake." The words hung heavy, raw with the sting of rejection. Daniel set the papers down, his full attention on Ethan. "That's not true," he said firmly. "You're not a mistake." Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at him. He might tell people, he admitted, the fear spilling out. About me. About us. The last word caught in his throat. A confession he hadn't meant to make. In Willow Creek, being out wasn't just a risk. It was a reckoning. His father's voice echoed in his mind. Sin like that has no place here. If Ryan talked, Ethan could lose everything. His job, his family, his fragile sense of belonging. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady but urgent. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that anchored Ethan, if only for a moment. But the fear lingered. Ryan's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a spark that could ignite the town's judgment, turning whispers into shouts. Ethan's secret was no longer his to control, and the consequences were closing in fast. Ethan's footsteps echoed in the quiet night as he walked back to the Willow Creek Community Center. Ryan's letter, a heavy weight in his pocket. The sting of betrayal hadn't faded since last night, but the panic had dulled into a restless ache. He couldn't stay home, where his father's stern silence filled the air with judgment. The center, with its promise of refuge, was the only place he could think to go. Daniel, the community mentor who'd offered him a lifeline, might help him make sense of the chaos. Inside, Daniel was leading a youth group session, his voice calm as he guided a handful of teens through a discussion about grief. Ethan lingered at the door, hesitant to interrupt. When the group dispersed, Daniel spotted him and waved him over. "Back so soon?" he asked, his tone light but searching. Ethan shrugged, unsure how to start. "Couldn't sleep," he muttered, the truth too raw to share outright. Daniel gestured to a chair, and they sat across from each other, the hum of the center's heater filling the silence. "Want to talk about it?" Daniel asked, his voice free of judgment. Ethan's fingers tightened around the letter in his pocket, but he didn't pull it out. Instead, he started small, talking about his mother's death 3 years ago, how the cancer took her fast, leaving a hole nothing could fill. Daniel listened, nodding, his attention unwavering. "Loss like that changes you," he said quietly. "Makes you question what's left." Ethan's guard slipped. He found himself talking about Ryan, not the letter, but the hope Ryan had sparked and then crushed. "I thought he got me," Ethan said, voice low, like he saw who I really am, but he didn't. He just left. The admission felt like peeling back skin, exposing something raw. Daniel's expression didn't waver. "That's his failure, not yours," he said firmly. "You don't have to carry his choices." The words hit Ethan hard, stirring something he couldn't name. Daniel's steady presence, his ability to listen without preaching, felt like a tether in a storm. They talked late into the night, the conversation shifting from loss to dreams Ethan had never voiced, wanting to leave Willow Creek, to find a place where he didn't have to hide. Daniel shared fragments of his own story, a life spent navigating expectations, a past he'd left behind in another town. "Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find who you're meant to be," he said, his words lingering. As the nights passed, Ethan returned to the center, drawn to Daniel's quiet strength. Their talks became a ritual. After hours, when the town slept, they'd sit and unravel the weight of their lives. Ethan began to notice the way Daniel's voice softened when he spoke, the way his hand lingered when passing a coffee mug. It wasn't just gratitude Ethan felt. It was something deeper, a pull that scared and thrilled him. He'd never let himself think of men this way before Ryan, and now with Daniel, the feeling was stronger, more real. One evening, as they sat over lukewarm coffee, Ethan hesitated, then spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're not supposed to be you?" His voice trembled, the question a risk. Daniel paused, his gaze steady. "Every day," he admitted, "but I've learned you can't live for other people's rules. You have to find your own." The words hung between them, charged with an unspoken understanding. Ethan's heart raced, the air thick with possibility. But the town wasn't asleep. Whispers had started, fueled by Ryan's loose lips. Ethan overheard a co-worker at the auto shop mutter about, "That kid hanging around Daniel too much." The gossip was vague but sharp, a warning of what could come. Ethan's fear crept back. Ryan's betrayal had already exposed him, and now his connection with Daniel was drawing attention. If the town suspected anything, it wouldn't just be rumors. It could cost Ethan his job, his family, everything. And what would it cost Daniel, who'd built a life here? As Ethan left the center that night, Daniel called after him. "You're not alone, Ethan. Don't forget that." The words were a lifeline, but they couldn't quiet the growing dread. The town's judgment was closing in, and Ethan felt the walls tightening. He wanted to believe in the hope Daniel offered, but Ryan's letter burned in his memory, a reminder that trust could break. The connection with Daniel felt like salvation, but it also felt like a spark in a town ready to ignite. The whispers in Willow Creek grew louder, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Ethan felt the town's eyes on him, at the auto shop, the diner, even walking down Main Street. Ryan's betrayal had cracked open a door Ethan had kept locked, and now the rumors were spilling out. "Heard he's been spending too much time with that Daniel guy," a co-worker muttered, loud enough for Ethan to hear. The words landed like a jab, sharpening his dread. At 22, he'd learned to dodge suspicion, but this was different. The town was watching, and they weren't kind. Ethan's nights at the Willow Creek Community Center with Daniel had become his anchor. But even that felt precarious now. Their talks, once a safe haven, carried a new weight. Ethan caught himself watching Daniel too closely. The way he leaned in when he spoke, the quiet intensity in his voice. It wasn't just comfort anymore. It was a pull Ethan couldn't ignore, one that made his pulse quicken and his thoughts spiral. But every moment they shared felt like a risk, a step closer to the town's judgment. The storm broke at home. Ethan's father, a deacon with a rigid grip on tradition, had been distant since Ethan's mother died. Now, his silence turned hostile. Ethan came home one evening to find his father waiting, arms crossed, a newspaper folded on the table. "We need to talk," his father said, voice cold. Ethan's stomach dropped. He knew that tone. It was the same one his father used to shut down anything that challenged his world. "People are talking," his father began, eyes fixed on Ethan. "About you and that mentor. They say it's not right." Ethan's throat tightened. Ryan's whispers had reached his father, twisted into something ugly. "It's not what you think," Ethan said, but his voice wavered. His father's gaze hardened. "I don't care what it is. You fix this, Ethan, or you're no son of mine." The words cut deeper than Ryan's letter, slicing through the fragile hope Ethan had clung to. His father didn't wait for a response, walking away as if Ethan were already gone. The rejection fueled Ethan's anger. He hadn't chosen this fight, but it was here. At the auto shop the next day, the rumors hit harder. A regular customer, a church friend of his father's, refused Ethan's service, muttering about sinners. His boss pulled him aside, voice low. "Keep your personal life out of work, kid. I can't lose customers." Ethan nodded, jaw tight, but the warning stung. His job, his last tether to stability, was slipping. Desperate for clarity, Ethan went to the community center that night. Daniel was there, sorting flyers for a youth event, but he stopped when he saw Ethan's expression. "What happened?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. Ethan hesitated, the weight of his father's words pressing down. "My dad heard the rumors," he said finally, "about us. He thinks I'm wrong." The confession felt like a wound reopened, but Daniel's steady presence eased the sting. "You're not wrong," Daniel said, voice firm. "Your father's scared of what he doesn't understand. That's his burden, not yours." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the town's whispers were growing into shouts. "It's not just him," Ethan said. "Ryan's been talking. People know." Daniel's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger crossing his face. "Ryan's trying to save himself," he said, "but he's hurting you to do it." The truth hit Ethan hard. Ryan's betrayal wasn't just a breakup. It was a calculated move to deflect suspicion. Ethan's secret, once shared in trust, was now a weapon in Ryan's hands. The realization deepened his fear. If the town turned on him, what would happen to Daniel? He'd built a life here, a fragile balance of helping others while keeping his own past hidden. Ethan's presence was putting that at risk. As they sat in silence, Ethan's thoughts raced. He wanted to stay, to lean into the connection with Daniel that felt like his only truth. But the town's judgment was closing in, and his father's ultimatum echoed, "Fix this, or you're no son of mine." Ethan's defiance was growing, but so was the cost. Leaving meant losing his family, his job, his place in Willow Creek. Staying meant facing a town that might never accept him. Daniel reached out, his hand steadying Ethan's trembling one. "We'll face this together," he said. But Ethan wasn't sure together was enough to weather the storm. Ethan stood in the town hall, heart pounding, as Willow Creek's residents filled the rows of chairs. The community meeting was meant to discuss a new park, but Ethan felt every eye on him, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Ryan's whispers had spread like wildfire, twisting Ethan's connection with Daniel into something scandalous. At 22, Ethan had spent his life avoiding this moment, but hiding was no longer an option. He gripped the edge of the podium, voice shaking but clear. "I'm gay," he said, "and I'm done pretending I'm not." The room froze, then erupted in murmurs. Ethan's father, seated near the front, stood and walked out, his silence louder than any words. Friends he'd known since childhood averted their eyes. The town's judgment, once a whisper, was now a roar. Ethan's chest tightened, but he held his ground, the truth both a weight and a release. He glanced at Daniel, who stood at the back, his expression steady, but tense. Daniel's nod gave Ethan the strength to step down, but the cost was immediate. By morning, the fallout spread. Ethan's boss at the auto shop called him in. "Customers are complaining," he said, voice clipped. "I can't keep you, if this keeps up." Ethan's job, his lifeline, was gone. At home, his father left a note. "You made your choice. Don't come back." The rejection stung, but it wasn't a surprise. What hurt more was the silence from friends, the way neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. Willow Creek had drawn a line, and Ethan was on the wrong side. Daniel found him that evening at the community center, sitting alone, staring at the floor. "You were brave out there," Daniel said, sitting beside him. "Braver than most." Ethan shook his head, voice bitter. "Brave doesn't pay the bills, or keep my dad from hating me." Daniel's hand rested on his shoulder, a quiet anchor. "You stood up for yourself. That's more than most people do in a lifetime." But the conversation shifted when Ethan asked, "What about you? What happens if they turn on you too?" Daniel's silence was heavy, his gaze distant. After a moment, he spoke, voice low. "I left a town like this once, years ago, because I loved someone I wasn't supposed to." The confession hit Ethan like a shockwave. Daniel had been in his shoes, hiding a truth that didn't fit. "I thought I could start over here," Daniel continued. "But maybe I've just been running." Ethan's trust wavered. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, hurt creeping into his voice. Daniel's past wasn't just a story. It was a secret that mirrored Ethan's own, one that could have helped him feel less alone. "I wanted to protect you," Daniel said, "and myself." The admission stung, but Ethan saw the fear in Daniel's eyes, a mirror of his own. They were both caught in Willow Creek's judgment, their bond a fragile defiance against it. The town's pressure didn't let up. A group of residents petitioned to remove Daniel from the community center, claiming his influence was troubling. Ethan overheard the talk at the diner, words like inappropriate and sinful thrown around with righteous certainty. He wanted to protect Daniel, but his own life was unraveling. The connection they'd built, the hope it sparked, felt like a lifeline slipping through his fingers. Late that night, Ethan and Daniel met again, the weight of the town's rejection pressing down. "I can't stay here," Ethan said, voice breaking. "Not like this." Daniel nodded, his hand finding Ethan's. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, "but you need to decide what you're fighting for." Ethan's heart raced, torn between the safety of Daniel's support and the fear of what staying together might cost. The town's judgment was a wall, but their bond was a crack in it, a chance to rebuild something real. Ethan's decision crystallized under the weight of Willow Creek's rejection. At 22, he'd lost his job, his family, and the fragile belonging he'd clung to. But his public stand at the town hall had sparked something unbreakable. He wasn't just surviving, he was choosing himself. The cost was steep, but the clarity it brought burned brighter than the town's judgment. As he packed a single bag, Daniel's words echoed. "You need to decide what you're fighting for." Ethan knew now. It was his right to be true. Daniel faced his own reckoning. The petition to remove him from the community center gained traction, fueled by gossip about his connection with Ethan. At a tense meeting, residents demanded answers, their accusations sharp. Daniel stood firm, his voice steady. "My job is to support, not judge," he said. "If that's a problem, I'll step down." His defiance shifted the room. Some softened, others doubled down, but a few voices, including a youth group member Ethan had mentored, spoke up in his defense. The petition failed, but Daniel's position hung by a thread. Meanwhile, Ryan's betrayal unraveled. His whispers, meant to shield himself, backfired when a co-worker overheard him bragging about dodging a bullet with Ethan. The truth spread, and Willow Creek's tight-knit gossip turned on him. Customers avoided his father's hardware store, their disapproval quiet, but clear. Ryan cornered Ethan outside the diner one evening, voice low with regret. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. Ethan's gaze was cold. You made your choice. Live with it. Ryan's shame was his consequence, a small justice in a town that rarely offered it. Ethan and Daniel met one last time at the community center, the air heavy with unspoken futures. I'm leaving for Atlanta, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the ache. There's a job there, a chance to start over. Daniel nodded, his hand brushing Ethan's in a fleeting gesture of support. You're braver than I was, he admitted. When I left my old town, I hid. You're not hiding. The words carried a weight that steadied Ethan's resolve. In Atlanta, Ethan found a small apartment and a job at a mechanic's shop, where no one cared who he loved. He joined a community group for young adults, their acceptance a stark contrast to Willow Creek's scorn. Late-night calls with Daniel became his lifeline, their bond deepening despite the distance. Daniel shared his own plans. He'd stay in Willow Creek, fighting to keep the center a safe space, but he was considering a move one day, somewhere he could live openly too. Ethan's father remained distant, his silence a wound that hadn't healed. But a letter arrived one day from his sister, who'd left for college years ago. I heard what happened, she wrote. I'm proud of you. Call me. The words cracked open a door Ethan thought was locked forever. He dialed her number, voice trembling as they talked, rebuilding a connection he'd feared lost. As Ethan settled into his new life, Daniel's voice lingered from their last call. You're enough, Ethan. You always were. The words anchored him through the uncertainty. Atlanta wasn't perfect, but it was a place where he could breathe, where his truth wasn't a secret to bury. Ryan's betrayal, his father's rejection, the town's judgment, they'd shaped him, but they didn't define him. Ethan was building a life where he could be seen, not as a mistake, but as himself. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. More stories are coming that will move you, inspire you, and challenge the way you see your own journey. Every story matters, and each one brings us closer to who we are meant to become.